Sunny-ish, cloudish kind of day. Today's going to be a gun range day, hopefully. A little bit of wind out there. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad. But anyway, it's cooler. It's only like 9 degrees. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, which is kind of cool for this time of year. Again, I heard say, well, May is going to turn out to be one of the hottest months on record. But it's not. It's cool. I mean, there's tornado warnings and there's snow just north of here. Not that far north either. And there's a massive cold front coming in. Not freezing, hopefully. You never know. You never know what you're going to get around here. But that said, I think a lot of it's so much hot air, like that. Yes, there is some global warming. I agree with that. We're talking about like 0.85 or 0.83 of a degree. Hardly even worth mentioning. Is so negligible. The CO2 emissions are like, maybe not even a thousandth of the lethal dose that they're, like we're way nothing to worry about at all. The CO2 is nowhere in the atmosphere where they said it was going to build up. It's not there. Human beings count for less than 1% of all CO2. Forest fires, volcanoes, stuff like that. It's stuff like that. Now, I know about the methane gas released in the Arctic, but that's been like that forever. Yes, there are big pockets and stuff like that. That could change things. Sure, there's no doubt. But I think it has less to do with human activity. And again, I looked into the whole global warming thing as non-biasedly as I could, and it's a little fudged on both sides. But considering that we've been warming up since the last major ice age about 25,000 years ago. Is it really global warming or just the cycle, right? And of course, if you look into the sun, not directly because you'll blind yourself, you'll pollute your retinas doing that, but look into like the solar cycles of the sun, it seems to more correlate with what the weather patterns we're seeing now. We're starting to see, the powerful volcanoes. One thing is when the sun is less active, you get more volcanoes. And then when you get more volcanoes, you get more, greenhouse effect. Then it warms up the planet again. This takes billions of years to do usually. At one point, the planet was, we had 3 snowball Earths in our history. And we also had, a volcanic, planet, where there was so many volcanoes. It was just, it was a pretty desolate place. You couldn't live here. And stuff like that. So to me, Mother Nature has its cycle. I'm not saying people don't pollute. I'm not saying we don't have problems. But I don't think Mother Nature always trumps man, period. We're no match for Mother Nature. But this brings me on to the topic of the carbon credit thing. Now, Alberta, they're talking about carbon emissions in Alberta for the oil sands. And, of course, you have to understand the groups that are, they're pretty much calling for, the stop of the oil sands. Now, these groups, they're typically funded by Saudi Arabia and George Soros. They kind of work together, and it's against the fracking industry. Why? Well, there's a few things. You have to understand, the Rockefellers, they're in the oil and gas industry for sure, but they want it where it's cheap and they don't have to pay anybody labor wages and stuff like that. What I have a feeling is going to happen in Alberta is you're going to see, after all, they're estimating in the oil industry because of the Saudi Arabian oil hit that they did, that 185,000 people are going to lose their jobs. I don't know how many so far to date, but this is both sides of the border, Canada and the United States. So they're estimating that much. That's just devastating. So who are they going to bring in? Well, they're going to bring in migrant workers. Why? Because they can pay them $8 an hour, no benefits. And they might pay them 10, whatever. But that's what's going to happen. We're going to displace our population. We do that. They've been doing this for a long time. NAFTA is kind of like the first kind of phase of it. TAFTA, CAFTA. Now you got the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership around the corner, and the North American Union. All that means is wages are going to go down dramatically. So it's not, the sign is now. You know what I mean? But the thing is, they're talking about carbon emissions that the oil sands may actually produce an extra 100 and some odd tons of carbon by the year 2030. But it's hard to say because that's going on existing technology now. Who knows? Maybe we find better alternatives between now and then. Who knows? Things can happen, right? Nobody could stop an idea whose time has come. So meaning the person that, like in France there, where they got that big fusion reactor that they're building, there's a couple of fusion reactors. And right now, fusion, they've only got, I think they can only sustain it for about a second. But a second could turn into a millennium, with just the right calculations. You know what I mean? It's if you can sustain it for a second, you can sustain it for an eternity, and just figuring out how do you sustain it for the eternity. Sorry, eternity, eternity. Yeah, but anyway, the idea, of that hasn't really flourished yet. Here in Quebec, we have low carbon emissions because we use hydro. So when we look at that, I mean, maybe, going back to opening up the old power dams might be a good idea. I always say hydroelectric is probably one of the most efficient and safest forms of energy out there. Yeah, you got to build a big hydro dam somewhere, and yeah, it kills a few salmon, but there's ways to do, they can net off the salmon and make salmon spawning ramps and stuff like that so they can get back up the falls. These ideas have been done. They can do it, So you can have a fairly low impact. But even at that, what real impact does a hydro dam really have? It's even the largest ones in the world are only a few 100 feet wide. You know what I mean? Considering, we'll use the Ottawa River, for example. The Ottawa River, okay, before it gets to the St. Lawrence, is, 600 miles long. Before that, you got the French River, which is a couple hundred miles, and I think it goes right up to Hudson Bay, up that far. So when you look at it like that, I mean, you've got opportunity there to store some of that moving water, which is traveling energy. And again, the law of energy cannot be created nor destroyed; it can only be transferred from one form to the other. So hydrostatic energy gets turned into electricity via turbine. That said, making more efficient turbines. Again, what happens when a hydro dam explodes? Power goes out for a week. Maybe a town gets flooded. What happens when a nuclear power plant, although nuclear power is very, very safe, it's when something goes wrong, it's just complete, excellent safety record, catastrophic environmental failure like Fukushima or Chernobyl or someplace like that, or 3 Mile Island, or, pick one. It's always catastrophic. I'm not a fan of nuclear power at all, just because of that. Yes, I get it safe to a good degree. But again, you get an earthquake, you get a leaky reactor, a faulty rod, things melt down, you got a problem. And it's not like you can just clean this thing up in a week. It's the Exxon Valdez oil spill is probably less damaging than a power plant meltdown. You know what I'm saying? And that was pretty bad. That said, converting things more to electric. I'm not a big fan of the big giant windmill things. I've already been through California. Mind you, years ago, going from San Francisco to Los Angeles, I took a bus in between and hitchhiked a bit and did this, did that. I got a better deal on the ticket to San Francisco. It was like $450 from Ottawa to San Francisco. Two flights. I had to stop in Toronto. Ottawa to Toronto, Toronto to San Francisco, $450. The flight to LA was something like $650. This is, mind you, back in the 90s, okay? And to take the bus, I think it was like $80. So I was like $450 plus $80, no brainer, right? So okay, you spent an 8-hour trip, and I enjoyed the trip. Seeing, passing all the different places. But what I couldn't get over was the windmills. Like, here they are talking green energy, and the end of fossil fuels. Meanwhile, how many thousands and thousands of acres of land were just not destroyed, but just covered with these windmills? They're an eyesore, Now, if a farmer wants to put a windmill on his farm, I'm all for that. Like in that, I think wind and solar work on a small scale, but they don't really work on a big scale for a lot of reasons. That said, doesn't mean you can't supplement. For example, every government building in Ottawa or in Toronto or whatever, why don't they have solar panels on the tops? At least if it runs the lights, you get, that's where you get your zero sum, and stuff like that. But to run the industrial stuff like the 220, the 550, the 600, 460 volt, 600 volt. That stuff you need hydro, you need nuclear power, you need that type of stuff. But I'm not a fan of nuclear. We used to have a hydro dam just a couple of towns over here, and that ran, like it's still there. Like the infrastructure is there. It's decaying now, but they just keep it open as a thing. But they can revamp that. All these little hydro dams, I think, are actually, I can get the idea that one nuclear plant is probably cheaper than running 50 hydro plants, but there's ways to get around that too, through pricing, stuff like that, but also too the technology, the turbines and stuff like that. So anyway, I digress. You get the idea that green energy. I think we here's like paper bags, going from plastic to paper bags. They're saying, okay, we're going to get rid of plastic bags because it's too polluting to the environment. and we're going to go to paper. Now they're saying, well, we're cutting down too many trees for the paper bags, so we're going back to plastic. What? They don't know what they're doing. So they're talking about these carbon credits again. Now, my prime minister, love him or hate him, I've always said Harper's in it for himself, and I agree. You know, he's an oil tycoon, sure. I mean, you have to understand, every politician is a fascist in Canada or the United States. Why? What they do is they get elected, okay, from usually they get money from an industry, you know, campaign contributions from some industry. In Harper's case, they're probably from big oil. And what they do is when you get into office, you pass laws to favor that company. Now, mind you, they're heavily invested. With Jack Layton, it was in the housing industry. Hence why we want so much social housing out there, because they're making money hand over fist on it. So all these guys, they're fascists. They're basically going to, when you have business and state in bed together, you have fascism. Now, our government is socialist fascist. The American government is still socialist fascist, working on kind of more communism with all the policing and the police state. They're working towards Marxism, not right away, but they're going to go to communism, then Marxism. A lot of people, the States isn't communist. The government is. we don't have a libertarian government anywhere in the world. It doesn't exist. We either have socialist fascist, which is the majority, Canada, Europe, United States, and then or communist or Marxist, you know, or people dead in a ditch over there somewhere. That's pretty much what we got. You know, liberty is never on the priority of any government. So here in Quebec, they've installed the carbon tax. They figured, okay, well, even though it's the highest probably taxed place in the country, BC competing, it's very expensive to live here for the tax. Everything here is a tax. I mean, my driver's license, I mean, is a good example. It's a tax. Do they really need to be charging me $1,200 minimum? Not just one part of it. That's just a driving school. Now, to get the license, it's another $300, $400, $500. And then if I want to put a plate on a car, there's a couple of $100s there. If I want to put insurance, there's another couple of $100. It's a tax. You know, the province is broke. It's a tax. You buy a car, there's a tire tax. There's taxes on this, tariffs and taxes and taxes. There's so many taxes that they tax you to die. I mean, like, you can't even make that up. You know, it's like, that's craziness. So you got the people out there, which I really do like. I get government is supposed to be nonpartisan and stuff like that, but they do seem to be, because it's when you see the government, they're always coming out with the global warming stuff, and we need carbon credits, but nobody's explained how a carbon credit will lower emissions, and none of it ever does. I mean, if you're really worried about pollution, you start with India and China. That's where you start. You know, our regulations, yeah, sure, they can be improved, but again, it comes back to, they want to, you know, basically get the Alberta oil sands to basically buy carbon credits. That's what they're saying. And Harper came out and said, hey, look, no, it's a hot air credit. It's a scam. When my own prime minister says that, like, you know, love him or hate him, I mean, when he says that, at least he's telling you the truth. And it is true. The carbon credits, Al Gore's carbon credit thing, or cap and trade, whichever you want, you know, they change the name from it time to time. Because again, once people figure out what it is, it's like, we don't want that. Now, there's idiots out there that think, you know, they use buzzwords like zero-sum energy output. So what they're telling the Alberta oil sands to do is buy carbons in other countries to help offset the industry there. Somebody's trying to make money off of this. You know, it's you know, no, if you want lower emissions, you have to lower emissions, period. Stricter standards, that's it. But you can, if you regulate yourself out of business, you know, and again, the globalists would love to see like zero energy production whatsoever in the North America, Canada. They want that all overseas, you know. But then, you know, you lose all your job. This is why I'm more nationalist, because I believe that if we were to just use our oil sands, we could export some, but the majority, just domestically, we could nationalize it, subsidize it to a bit, so that, you know, the average person is not dying to pay for their gas just to get to work, that type of thing. We could do stuff like that, but we could even run it at cost. You know, that said, you know, restore the Bank of Canada, then it could run the oil sands every year, and it would be for the people. So that means we don't have to keep expanding. 33.5 million people. You know, yeah, we're going to use a lot of fuel per year, but we could slow down the production to probably even a tenth of what it is, which would lower our emissions. You know, maybe we export 10%, whatever. But when it comes to the point where all we do is export, like here in Quebec, where we make our big money is exporting hydro to the United States. But that's a different thing, because again, the emissions are so much lower. We can, there's an area you could do that. The next one is water is going to be the big one. Like right now, we could be building pipelines to California to be giving them some water. Now, the NUAPA thing, I'm not a big fan of, because the problem is the oversight needs to be by the people, not the government. Because the problem with the government's oversight is that they sell the farm, for beans. You know what I mean? They're like, oh yeah, well, we can exploit this. We don't want to exploit it to the max. We just want to, give them maybe enough water that it doesn't hurt our water tables at all. Because if we're sending, water to a droughted area, and then we create a drought up here ourselves, well, it's, so you have to regulate that. That's the problem, is it gets out of control, and so you do have to regulate things. But as far as clean energy and stuff like that, or clean environment, again, the cap and trade thing is just the biggest scam ever. So BC, Quebec, and Ontario getting in line with, California. Well, the cap and trade. I mean, think about it. Thomas Mulcair is going to be making money off of cap and trade. That's why they're pushing for it. Guaranteed, these people are going to be making money off of this. Guaranteed. I don't have any direct evidence yet, but usually when they're pushing for something, that's why. It's not because they care about the environment, it's because they're going to make money off of it. If they're pushing for cap and trade, anybody that really looks into it understands, if this factory here can pollute as much as it wants, all it has to do is buy carbon credits from this kind of, what is a carbon credit anyway? What the heck is that, So this company here doesn't pollute hardly at all, and they get, say, $1 billion in carbon credits. Well, they can sell their credits to these people. So nothing changes. These people keep polluting. The only thing that changes is politicians get rich in between. That's all it does. It doesn't lower emissions. They say, well, if they pollute less and these people pollute more, well, they buy these credits and it'll come to a zero sum. No, you still got the same amount of pollution. Why? And these people here, because they have to pay more to pollute, they can't upgrade their factories. So what you do is you say, the standards say, we'll put you on, you take 10% of your profits per year and you upgrade your factory. That would work, So you're not regulating them, say, okay, you have to do it in 1 year. It's okay, well, this is how much you make. We could see you progressing at this this rate in this amount of time. Maybe even give them a government grant to get them started. Say, okay, well, here, we want you to be, this factory has half the pollution you do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a subsidy for now, bring it to that level, and once you get to that level, you pay us back over XYZ amount of years. Okay, people would go for that. And of course, you don't break the bank to do this. It's a gradual thing. And you can do this from any industry, from the mom and pop shops right up to the biggest industry. Obviously, go after the biggest industries first. Cleaner. And there's people out there like the oil sands. When you look into the technology that's into that, it's unbelievable what they're doing. It is unbelievable what they're doing. Is it? Yes, you got to break an egg to make an omelet, but they've come a long way. So I think the investment is okay, well, until we find the complete replacement for, oils and gases and stuff, which are there to take advantage of, to a point, but the efficiency can be, look, 35 years ago, taking oil out of sand was like a pipe dream. It literally was no possibility. That's that's the only way we pretty much extract oil here. And who's the pioneers in that? Is my country. Like when it comes to mining and stuff like that, we get, this is what my country is. We're a resource-based country. Now we should start turning some of our country into a product, but so buy stuff from us for once in a while. Like China never buys anything else except for raw materials. So we're saying, why do you buy our products? But they don't sell their products to the people. Well, they sell some, but you know what I mean. Like they don't have the quality of life that we have here. Now that said, we also turned a blind eye to the emissions over there, and then we beat we bash the industries here for being such harsh polluters when they have the highest standards in the world. Same in the United States, we have the highest, maybe not the highest standards in the world, but of the highest standards. You go to China or Indonesia or any of those, or even Mexico, there's no scrubbers in the coal stacks. You know what I mean? That type of thing. China builds about 2 coal plants a week, and no scrubbers and no stacks. That type of thing. So, here we are sending all our manufacturing over there and then say, look at how clean we are over here, but we're all on the same planet. So we should be actually saying, if we want to buy our stuff, we're going to put tariffs on your products, and they're going to make them a lot more expensive, a lot less competitive if you don't comply. And then, of course, we're going to start manufacturing stuff here. If we manufactured stuff here, we wouldn't need them. The planet would be a lot cleaner. But that said, industry, in the gas industry, Norway's a big one. They're really good at what they do. So you can get innovative and stuff like that. But yeah, it does take investment, sure. Now the whole thing with the oil sands, again, you have to understand the oil hit that we took here because of Saudi Arabia basically was to destabilize. Well, there could have been a couple of things here. Number one, it was to destabilize Iran and Russia's oil and gas industry. It was also done to go against the U.S. fracking industry, which George Soros and all that, and Saudi Arabia have been basically, funding the green campaigns. And think about it, Saudi Arabia, a big oil producer, funding environmentalists to boycott the oil sands, to boycott the fracking industry. And I'm still on the fence about the fracking industry. I don't think it's as bad as people say, but I don't think it's good either. So, but the thing is that when you look at these players doing stuff like that, they're doing it to cut the competition, not doing it because they care about the planet, right? So, also too, with Saudi Arabia sending more oil to China than anywhere else, that's their number one customer. They might be thinking about getting rid of the U.S. dollar. Hence, you got a Houthi uprising from Iran. That's what I think that's about. And at some point, I mean, Saudi Arabia, they're talking about how bad ISIS is beheading people and stuff like that. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is just, hiring minimum wage executioners, basically low wage executioners. They do about 90 beheadings a year, and yet somehow they're an ally of ours. Again, Saudi Arabia, no, it's their oil. It's all business. That's why they're one of the worst terrorist organizations on the planet, But yet, we give them a pass because they got oil. So I guess next to that, this whole carbon credit thing, don't fall for it. It's a scam. Politicians will get rich, but if you're one of those really hardcore environmentalists, look into it. You'll see, when Kathleen Wynne is out there saying we're going to have a zero sum, it's like either they're that stupid and they just read buzzwords, but that's part of the Agenda 21 stuff too, is throw you up buzzwords that sound nice. Sustainable development. Sustainable development means high taxes and stripping you of your property rights. And property rights, trust me, is not just your home, not just your land, it's everything you own. And it's green communism. They call it the watermelon. Green on the outside, red on the inside. So Agenda 21, carbon credits are part of that too. It's a scam. It's a complete fascistic scam. So, but if you actually care about the environment, no, the only way to get lower emissions is through regulations. Now, if you regulate people out of business, then the problem there is then you have to rely on somebody else. Problem is, foreign countries like China, India, Mexico, they're not going to comply to our regulations. You know what I mean? So either A, we give all our jobs to them, which we've already kind of done, give all our good paying jobs to them, and then let the technology kind of just go stagnant, and then buy the same product from heavier people who pollute worse than us. Or we put a tariff on the people that pollute, that want to export products here or import products here, and tell them to clean up their act. Meanwhile, over here, we put our standards high, but we have to invest in them. So that's kind of the way it is. Or we need the guy who comes up with the fusion reactor in his garage type of thing. That's what we need. Other thing is hydroelectric. Again, I'm a huge fan of hydroelectric. It's the one that seems to take up the least amount of room. Like again, windmill. On the day that I saw the windmills in California the first time, and then the second time around, I had to take the bus back. The day I went was a hot, dry, sunny day, and I think I saw 2 windmills moving out of probably thousands. You know what I mean? So yeah, good investment there. Now up here in Canada, windmills are not a great idea. Why? The winter, as soon as the ice gets on them, they start getting out of balance. You snap them. It's like the Darius Rotor project that they had with the NEP in Toronto. The thing, it lasted a little while, then I was, kept snapping. But that's what a Darius Rotor ends up doing. That's the problem with windmill generators. They don't really last that long. I mean, they're spinning in pretty high winds, and it's the constant vibration on the columns that usually snap. Some of them do last a long time, but if they're working at max capacity for months on end, if they got a place where there's enough wind where they're going to be moving all the time, yeah. But it's the days they don't move, and the same with solar. Again, it works on a smaller scale. Maybe run a farm, run a supplement, but it's for the amount of acres you have to destroy, or maybe not destroy, but you're putting up all these things, these really tall. They're an eyesore. They're an eyesore. Solar panels, not quite so bad because you can at least hide them on your roof type of thing. If somebody has a small little 4 or 10 amp windmill generator in their yard. That's not so bad. But it's when you're talking something 300 feet tall, and thousands of them. Okay, that's ridiculous. Go back to hydro. And not only that, the maintenance on it, you can't tell me that that's cheaper than running. It's a make-work project is what that is. It's not cheaper than running one hydro dam. And it's definitely not, the one hydro dam is a constant flow of power. Again, you're just harnessing Mother Nature and law of energy. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, it can only be transferred from one form to the other, hydrostatic to electricity. Plain, simple. It wasn't broke. Why did we try to fix it? It's almost better than fusion. And now the thing is you can get, power turbines like a tenth the size, putting out 5 times more power than what they used to. Just the efficiency now. So there's no reason why we can't do stuff like that. The other thing that I want to do a thing is thorium power. Thorium, I think, might be a good alternative to nuclear. I mean, it still kind of has its dangers, sure, but I think India is experimenting around with the thorium reactors and stuff like that. So who knows? Maybe that might be the new thing. But again, the big complex they're building in France, the thing is just massive. It's something like 600 by 600. It's like or 10 football fields or whatever. The thing's just massive, and they're building a fusion reactor there. So fusion is not a matter of if now; it's just a matter of when. So as soon as they get beyond 1 second, they'll have a sustainable power for an eternity. And then at that point, think about a car. Your car running on fusion. I mean, your house running on having its own personal fusion reactor. You get rid of all the hydro lines. You can then get rid of the power dams. You can get rid of the nuclear dams. The nuclear is the stuff I want to get rid of. Yes, it's safe, and they got a 100% safety record, and then all of a sudden they don't. you know what I mean? When things go bad, they go really bad. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. So the carbon credit things, again, no one can, the explanation of how it's supposed to save the environment is this guy who doesn't pollute can sell credits, made up credits, to a guy over there who pollutes more. But yet they're still doing this. The factories are still doing the exact same thing. Anyway, so if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day, eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, it's a nice, bright, sunny-ish, cloudish kind of day. Today's going to be a gun range day, hopefully. A little bit of wind out there. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad. But anyway, it's cooler. It's only like 9 degrees. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, which is kind of cool for this time of year. Again, I heard say, well, May is going to turn out to be one of the hottest months on record. But it's not. It's cool. I mean, there's tornado warnings and there's snow just north of here. Not that far north either. And there's a massive cold front coming in. Not freezing, hopefully. You never know. You never know what you're going to get around here. But that said, I think a lot of it's so much hot air, like that. Yes, there is some global warming. I agree with that. We're talking about like 0.85 or 0.83 of a degree. Hardly even worth mentioning. Is it so negligible? The CO2 emissions are like maybe not even 1,000th of the lethal dose that they're like we're way nothing to worry about at all. The CO2 is nowhere in the atmosphere where they said it was going to build up. It's not there. Human beings count for less than 1% of all CO2. Forest fires, volcanoes, stuff like that. It's stuff like that. Now, I know about the methane gas released in the Arctic, but that's been like that forever. Yes, there are big pockets and stuff like that. That could change things. Sure, there's no doubt. But I think it has less to do with human activity. And again, I looked into the whole global warming thing as non-biasedly as I could, and it's a little fudged on both sides. But considering that we've been warming up since the last major ice age about 25,000 years ago. Is it really global warming or just the cycle, right? And of course, if you look into the sun, not directly because you'll blind yourself, you'll permit your retinas doing that, but look into like the solar cycles of the sun, it seems to more correlate with what the weather patterns we're seeing now. We're starting to see, the powerful volcanoes. One thing is when the sun is less active, you get more volcanoes. And then when you get more volcanoes, you get more, greenhouse effect. Then it warms up the planet again. This takes billions of years to do usually. At one point, the planet was, we had 3 snowball Earths in our history. And we also had, a volcanic, planet where there was so many volcanoes. It was just, it was a pretty desolate place. You couldn't live here, and stuff like that. So to me, Mother Nature has its cycle. I'm not saying people don't pollute. I'm not saying we don't have problems, but I don't think Mother Nature always trumps man. Period. We're no match for Mother Nature. But this brings me on to the topic of the carbon credit thing. Now, Alberta, they're talking about carbon emissions in Alberta for the oil sands. And, of course, you have to understand the groups that are, they're pretty much calling for, the stop of the oil sands. Now, these groups, they're typically funded by Saudi Arabia and George Soros. They kind of work together, and it's against the fracking industry. Why? Well, there's a few things. You have to understand. The Rockefellers, they're in the oil and gas industry for sure, but they want it where it's cheap and they don't have to pay anybody labor wages and stuff like that. What I have a feeling is going to happen in Alberta is you're going to see, after all, they're estimating in the oil industry because of the Saudi Arabian oil hit that they did, that 185,000 people are going to lose their jobs. I don't know how many so far to date, but this is both sides of the border, Canada and the United States. So they're estimating that much. That's just devastating. So who are they going to bring in? Well, they're going to bring in migrant workers. Why? Because they can pay them $8 an hour, no benefits. They might pay them 10, whatever. But that's what's going to happen. We're going to displace our population. We do that. They've been doing this